Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Ian Jackson. We warmly welcome the family of Private Joseph Francis Kopanica, whose story will be told shortly. We are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Thomas Furco, Ambassador of the Slavic Republic to Australia, and the accompanying delegation. We warmly welcome Group Captain Mac Cottrell, retired, representing the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Joseph Francis Kopanica. Joseph Kopanica was born on the 3rd of December 1919 in Czechoslovakia, the son of John Mokos Kopanica and Mary Irene Kopanica. Joseph's parents were born in Hovrobolta, a city in what is now the Slovak Republic. His father arrived in Australia in 1928, and the remainder of the family, including Joseph's brothers Emil, Arnold, and John, joined him 4 years later. Joseph lived in Tirip, about 100 kilometres north of Melbourne, where he attended primary school. A good cricketer and keen angler, he loved his Norton motorcycle and his greyhound named Sausage. Joseph worked on farms as a teenager and as a pastry cook in Melbourne. Whilst life in Australia was peaceful, the expansion of Nazi Germany saw Joseph's homeland increasingly come under threat. With the annexation of Austria in March 1938, the conquest and breakup of Czechoslovakia became Hitler's next ambition. The Munich Agreement of September 1938 saw the United Kingdom, the French Third Republic, and the Kingdom of Italy cede Czechoslovakian land to Germany. With the German invasion of Poland in September 1939, war was declared. In Australia, Joseph Kopanica was registered as an alien. In November 1939, he signed parole papers stating that he would neither directly nor indirectly take any action in any way prejudicial to the safety of the British Empire during the present war. Kopanica was naturalised not long afterwards, becoming an Australian citizen in February 1940. A year earlier, on the 7th of January 1941, Joseph Kopanica enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. He became part of the Australian Army Ordnance Corps, joining the 22nd Independent Brigade Group Ordnance Workshops and being assigned to the 2nd 4th Australian Field Workshop. The men of the Ordnance Corps were responsible for the coordinating supplies, including ammunition. Less than a month after enlisting, Private Kopanica embarked from Sydney Harbour on board the converted ocean liner Queen Mary. During his voyage, he was admitted to the ship's hospital, having suffered a reaction to an earlier inoculation. He had recovered by the time he arrived in Singapore on the 19th of February 1941. At this point in the war, most of Australia's forces were committed to fighting in the Mediterranean theatre. Australia was ill-prepared for an attack, lacking armaments, modern fighter aircraft, heavy bombers, and aircraft carriers. Singapore was considered almost impregnable, and the possibility of it falling to the enemy was almost unthinkable. In late 1941, as the Japanese struck at Pearl Harbor, those views began to be reassessed. The Japanese attack on Singapore began at 10:30 p.m. on the 8th of February 1942, when two Japanese divisions in Malaya crossed the Johor Strait and attacked the 22nd Brigade's front. The brigade and the 2nd 15th inflicted heavy casualties on the attackers and the artillery sank some barges. But with its communications cut, heavily outnumbered, and the Japanese infiltrating between positions, the brigade and the 2nd 15th withdrew. By the 13th of February, the battle for Singapore Island was all but over, and the British forces surrendered 2 days later. Initially imprisoned in the sprawling Changi prisoner of war camp, it was not long before Australian prisoners of war were allocated to external work parties. The first parties were dispatched around Singapore and southern Malaya, but Kopanica became part of E-Force, one of the last labour forces to leave Changi in early March 1943. Consisting of around 500 British and 500 Australians, E-Force sailed on a small cargo tramp ship to Sarawak before boarding a small steam cargo ship and sailed around the Borneo coastline to Sandakan, disembarking at Berhala Island. Accommodated in a prisoner of war camp, conditions were initially pretty good. The prisoners were even allowed to swim under the supervision of guards. In June, preparations were made ready to move E-Force to the mainland by barge. The night before the men were marched to the jetty, 8 prisoners escaped, splitting into groups to make good their initial safety. Most of the prisoners were not aware of the escape, but the skittish behavior of their guards was obvious. At Sandakan, the remaining prisoners were split into 3 groups, which were kept separated. Punishment was severe if the guards found the men talking to those from another camp. In October 1943, E-Force was amalgamated with B-Force, which had been held in a separate camp roughly 1 mile away. Conditions for the men deteriorated. A small cage was built to punish prisoners for trivial offences. Some men were confined without being able to stand up and with little food for as long as a month. The situation worsened in 1944, with brutal beatings, torture, and diminishing food supplies. Prisoners suffered from malaria, beriberi, and tropical ulcers, and the numbers of sick grew. Because of the lack of healthy prisoners for work parties, guards pulled sick men from their beds. Bash gangs attacked prisoners in numbers for the slightest misdemeanor. If one prisoner was viewed as not working properly, any number of men in his group could be beaten. In January 1945, the Japanese began to fear an Allied invasion of Borneo and started to move prisoners away from the coast to Ranao, a small village some 250 kilometers inland in the mountains. The first group of 470 prisoners, including 350 Australians, left in batches of 50. All of them were already weak with beriberi and malnutrition, and most lacked boots. Only 6 of some 2,500 Australian and British prisoners interned at Sandakan in northeastern Borneo would survive. Among the dead was Private Joseph Kopanica, who died as a prisoner of the Japanese on the 5th of August, 1945. He was 25 years old. Today, he is commemorated on the Labuan Memorial. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with more than 40,000 Australians who died serving their country in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We will now remember Private Joseph Francis Kopanica, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrubber Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. And we wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.